Well, hey there, and welcome to Board to Learn, the channel dedicated to helping you learn how to play your new games faster. My name is Kent, and today we're looking at Cascadia Alpine Lakes, a tile-laying strategy game for 1 to 4 players. So, meet me at the table, and we'll get started. The original Cascadia quickly became one of the most popular tile-laying games around, thanks to its relaxing gameplay, approachable rules, and satisfying puzzle. Cascadia Alpine Lakes builds on that foundation, but this is much more than just a new collection of tiles and animals. This time, you'll build your environment upward by stacking habitat tiles to create different elevations. Those elevations change how your wildlife scores. You'll also create alpine lakes and work toward new habitat scoring objectives, giving the familiar Cascadia puzzle a fresh new challenge. To set up, start by placing all of the wildlife tokens into the cloth bag, making sure to give it a good shake, and place it on the table. Shuffle all of the habitat tiles together, then remove a number of tiles based on your player count. Refer to the chart here, or on page 4 of the rulebook. Place the removed tiles back in the box without revealing them. Create face-down draw stacks with the remaining tiles in the middle of the table. Now take the habitat scoring cards as well as the wildlife elevation scoring card. Place the lake card face up in the middle of the table and place the wildlife elevation card above this. Then, for your first playthrough, look for the A card from the remaining 3 habitats, Forest, Meadow, and Glacier, and place them face up to the left of the lake card. Randomly give each player a starting habitat tile to place face up in front of them. Now set up the market. Reveal 4 habitat tiles and place them in a row in the middle of the table below the scoring cards. Then draw 4 wildlife tokens from the bag and place 1 token beneath each of the 4 habitat tiles. Make a draw pile of nature tokens within reach of all players. And lastly, choose the first player. The game suggests the person who most recently saw an alpine lake, or one of the wildlife in the game. Or just choose someone randomly. There is an advanced setup with environment scoring cards, but I will leave that for you to discover once you have played a few games first. And with that, the setup is complete. Cascadia Alpine Lakes is played over a series of turns, with each player taking 20 turns over the course of the game. On your turn, you'll draft 1 habitat tile and 1 wildlife token from the market. You'll then place the habitat tile into your environment and place the wildlife token onto an available tile. Once you've finished, refill the market and play passes clockwise to the next player. Play continues in this manner until every player has placed 20 habitat tiles into their environment. After the final turn, players total their points, and the player with the highest score wins. But before we take a closer look at a turn, let's first familiarize ourselves with the different types of habitat tiles. There are 3 habitat types in the game: Forest, Meadow, and Glacier. Throughout the game, you'll build and expand corridors of each habitat type by connecting matching habitats together. Some habitat hexagons also display 1 or more wildlife icons. These icons indicate which wildlife tokens may be placed onto that hexagon. If multiple wildlife icons are shown, you may place any one of those matching wildlife tokens there. If a habitat hexagon doesn't show a particular wildlife icon, that wildlife token can't be placed on it. You'll also notice some habitat hexagons have a keystone, identified by the small arrow above the wildlife icon. If you place or later elevate that matching wildlife token onto the keystone, you'll immediately gain a nature token, shown by the pinecone symbol. We'll talk about what those nature tokens do a little later. Finally, some habitat hexagons contain alpine lakes. Lakes can appear within any of the 3 habitat types, but they can never hold wildlife tokens. Instead, they'll become another important source of points during the final scoring phase. Now, let's take a closer look at each turn. At the start of your turn, you'll see 4 habitat tiles and 4 wildlife tokens arranged in 4 different combinations. Normally, you'll choose 1 habitat tile and the wildlife token beneath it in the same column. You can't mix and match, at least not yet. Before making your selection, check to see if any of the wildlife tokens have become overpopulated. If all 4 wildlife tokens are the same, they must immediately be wiped. Set all 4 tokens aside, then draw 4 new wildlife tokens from the bag, placing them one at a time into the 4 empty spaces. If all 4 of the replacement wildlife tokens also match, Simply wipe those as well and repeat this process until the 4 available wildlife tokens are no longer all the same. Once the market has been refilled with the valid set of wildlife tokens, return all of the wiped wildlife tokens to the bag. If exactly 3 wildlife tokens match, you may choose to wipe only the 3 tokens. Set them aside, draw 3 replacement wildlife tokens one at a time into the empty spaces, then return the wiped wildlife tokens to the bag. You may choose to do this only once during your turn. Once any overpopulation has been resolved, choose 1 habitat tile and 1 wildlife token from the same column. Now let's talk about nature tokens. Remember, you collect a nature token if you place a wildlife token on a keystone habitat. If you've collected a nature token, you may spend 1 to adjust what you are able to take. You have 2 ways to spend a nature token. You may ignore the normal column restrictions and choose any habitat tile along with any wildlife token currently available in the market. Or you may wipe any number of available wildlife tokens and replace them with new ones before making your selection. You may do the second option as many times as you have tokens to spend. And you can choose to spend another token after wiping to choose any habitat tile and wildlife token from the market. After spending a nature token, return it to the supply. Now it's time to place your habitat tile. First, you can rotate the tile however you'd like before placing it. When adding a tile to your environment, it must share at least one side with another visible habitat tile. In other words, at least one of the habitat hexagons on your new tile must touch an existing visible habitat hex along a full edge, not just at a corner. The habitat types don't have to match, but you'll want to keep the habitat scoring cards in mind as you build your environment. As your environment grows, you don't have to stay on the ground level. Once you have a good foundation, you can begin building upward by stacking habitat tiles. This is an important aspect of Alpine Lakes, which I will explain during scoring. To build upwards, place the new habitat tile over 1 or 2 existing habitat tiles that are on the same elevation. Keep in mind that the new tile can never be more than 1 elevation level higher than at least 1 adjacent space. If you cover a habitat hexagon that already has a wildlife token on it, don't remove that animal. Instead, move it onto the matching wildlife space on the new habitat tile. Because of this, you can only place a habitat tile over wildlife if the new tile has the matching wildlife icon on it. Now that you know how to place habitat tiles, let's talk about why you might want to place them in certain locations. Whenever matching habitat types connect together, they form a corridor. Throughout the game, you'll be trying to build these corridors to satisfy the objectives shown on your habitat scoring cards. Each habitat type scores differently, so it's a good idea to keep those objectives in mind as you build your environment. Don't worry about memorizing them just yet. We'll go over each habitat scoring card during the scoring section later in the video. Once your habitat tile has been placed, it's time to place your wildlife token. Real quick, there are 5 different wildlife token types in the game. None of the animals have special functions other than fulfilling requirements for the habitat scoring cards. Wildlife tokens may only be placed onto a habitat hexagon that shows the matching wildlife icon. They can be placed on your newly placed habitat tile or on any previously placed habitat tile in your environment with an available matching wildlife icon. Only 1 wildlife token may occupy each habitat hexagon, even though the hexagon might show multiple wildlife icons. Once a token has been placed, it cannot be moved, unless you're placing a new tile on top of it and elevating it. Wildlife tokens can never be discarded or placed on lakes. If you place or later elevate a wildlife token onto a keystone hexagon, don't forget to collect a nature token from the supply. As you decide where to place your wildlife tokens, keep an eye on your habitat scoring cards. Many of the habitat scoring objectives take the wildlife within those corridors into account. So, where you place your animals can be just as important as where you place your habitat tiles. If you're ever unable to legally place a wildlife token or don't want to, simply return it to the bag. Once you've finished placing both your habitat tile and wildlife token, refill the market. Reveal a new habitat tile and draw a new wildlife token from the bag, placing them into the empty column. If you used a nature token to draft from different columns, don't rearrange the market first. Simply place the new habitat tile and wildlife token into the empty spaces, leaving everything else where it is. Then, the next player in clockwise order takes their turn. Continue playing in this manner until each player has placed 20 habitat tiles. You'll know the game is over when the final player completes their turn and there are no habitat tiles left to refill the market. Once the final habitat tile has been placed, the game comes to an end and it's time to score. Grab the score pad included with the game to keep track of your score as we go. Since we set up the game using the A habitat scoring cards, let's take a look at how each one scores. Remember, a corridor can be a single hexagon or a connected group of matching habitat hexagons. Elevation doesn't matter, as long as those matching habitat hexagons remain connected. We'll score the 3 habitat types first, followed by lakes, wildlife elevation, any unused nature tokens, and finally determine the winner. Let's start by scoring our forest corridors. Each forest corridor in your environment scores separately based on the number of unique wildlife types found anywhere within that corridor. The more unique wildlife types in a corridor, the more points you'll earn. Make sure to score each forest corridor separately. Once you've scored each forest corridor, add those points together for your total forest score. Next, score your meadow corridors. For the A card, you're looking for groups of matching wildlife tokens. Each contiguous matching group scores based on its size. A meadow corridor can contain multiple scoring groups, and the groups may be any shape as long as the animals are connected to one another. Again, score each meadow corridor and its groups separately. Once you've scored every group, total those points together for your meadow score. Now let's score your glacier corridors. Each glacier corridor either scores or it doesn't. To score, a corridor must contain at least one pair of matching adjacent wildlife tokens. Score points based on the number of separate glacier corridors in your environment that meet the criteria. Next, score your lakes. Every lake is worth 1 point per level of elevation. So, a lake on level 3 would be worth 3 points. If a lake is completely surrounded by other habitat hexagons, double its value. It doesn't matter whether those surrounding hexagons contain wildlife tokens or not. As long as the lake is completely enclosed, it scores double points. Score each lake individually, then add those points together. Now it's time to score wildlife elevation. Go through each of the 5 wildlife types one at a time. First, score 2 points for every wildlife token of that type at level 3 or higher. Then compare the highest elevation reached by that wildlife type in each player's environment. The player whose wildlife is the highest will score bonus points. In a 2-player game, the player with that wildlife type at the highest elevation earns 2 bonus points. If tied, each player receives 1 point. In a 3 or 4-player game, the player with that wildlife type at the highest elevation earns 3 bonus points, while the player with the second highest elevation earns 1 bonus point. If 2 players are tied for the highest, each player scores 2 points, and no other points are awarded. If 3 or 4 players are tied for the highest, each player receives 1 point each, and no other points are awarded. Repeat this process for all 5 wildlife types. And finally, score 1 point for each of your remaining nature tokens. Once you've totaled your scores, the player with the highest score wins the game. If there's a tie, the tied player with the most remaining nature tokens wins. If there's still a tie, share the victory. Once you're more familiar with the game, try randomly drawing different habitat scoring cards during setup. Changing those scoring objectives can make each game feel fresh and encourage you to explore new strategies. And that's how to play Cascadia, Alpine Lakes. If you found this video helpful, please give it a like and consider subscribing to learn more great games. Turn the bell on to be notified of my latest videos. If you have any questions, drop them in the comments and I'll do my best to answer them. And remember, it's not just how you play, it's how much fun you have. I'll see you next time on Board to Learn. This time, you'll build your environment upward by stacking habitat. Once the final habitat tile, oh my gosh, you'll immediately gain a nature token, shown by the pinecone symbol. Pine cone.